Be very careful.
See you in your dreams.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and demons of stupidity. I am Lester Crowley III, Deputy of Common Sense and your vampire extraordinaire. Sorry I've been gone for 2 weeks. I've been frightfully ill and I'm still feeling a bit dreadful. But today's video will be another non-response one. Once again, I will not be responding to anything. This will be purely my own thoughts. Today I will explain the 3 primary dimensions of thinking and how to move beyond the one you're in. Get ready, folks, cause it's about to get sciencey in here. In order to understand my model of human thought, you have to first understand the 3 spatial dimensions of modern physics. Let's start with one-dimensional space. In a one-dimensional space, there are only 2 directions, backwards and forwards. You can only travel one of those 2 ways. You can't move sideways, diagonal, up, or down because those dimensions don't exist in a one-dimensional space. There is only moving forward or moving backward. It is simply a straight line. In fact, a straight line on a piece of paper is a perfect example of a one-dimensional space. You can only measure a one-dimensional shape with one-dimensional measurements. You can measure the length or the height, but not both. I think we've covered the basics of the first dimension pretty thoroughly now. Now let's do the second. In a 2-dimensional space, there are more options to the directions you can go. Think of a chessboard, for example. Chess pieces can move backwards and they can move forwards, but they can also move sideways and diagonally. They cannot move up and down though, because 2-dimensional spaces have no concept of up or down. Another example of a 2-dimensional space is the piece of paper I mentioned earlier. It's a rectangle with 4 sides. You can draw any shape on it you want, but no matter how hard you try to make that shape look 3-dimensional, the surface will remain flat. It is simply a flat shape. However, the options for measurement have increased. You can now measure the object's width and length instead of just the length or the width or the height. You've got 2 different directions which you can measure. But in the end, you're still limited by the 2-dimensional nature of the object, and that is something you can't get around. I think we understand 2-dimensional objects a bit better now. I think we can talk about 3-dimensional spaces now. A 3-dimensional space allows for 360 degrees of movement. You can go forwards, backwards, sideways, diagonal, up, down, long ways, front ways, and any other which ways you can think of. The world we live in, despite what flat earthers might tell you, is a 3-dimensional space. It is a sphere. Not a perfect sphere, but a sphere nonetheless. We can travel anywhere on it we want, and have even gone beyond it. We are 3-dimensional beings. Now, I'm sure all of you are saying, but Mr. Deputy, sir, how does this have anything to do with how people think? Well, lads, I'm about to tell you that. So we've explored the 3 dimensions of space, and we've established that we exist in the 3rd. But what if I told you that human thought functioned in a very similar manner to the 3 basic spatial dimensions of physics? And what if I told you that not everybody sees the world in the 3 dimensions that they live in? These are the 3 primary dimensions of human thought. There are anomalies that fall outside the purview of these 3 dimensions, but they are a vast minority, and we will not go into them in this particular video, or probably ever in the future. So, Let's explore one-dimensional thinking. A one-dimensional thinker is typically a simple-minded individual. Not stupid, just simple in their way of thinking. Almost all of them are moral absolutists, and more than half of them are religious fundamentalists. They are often uneducated, or only educated in a field that confirms their own biases. They rarely seek out knowledge that contradicts their own beliefs. They can be violent, emotionally unstable, and prone to justifying their actions, however horrible, as necessary or moral. But their defining characteristic is how they see the world. Just like the one-dimensional line, a one-dimensional thinker sees the world as a straight line. They are only able to go in two directions, backwards and forwards. They have no concept of anything else. Everything is black and white, us versus them, evil versus good, moral versus immoral. There is no room for nuance or critical thought. Don't let what I've said fool you, however. One-dimensional thinkers are not limited to the right wing. Not at all. Any ideology, political or otherwise, can and does have one-dimensional thinkers in their midst. Here are some notable one-dimensional thinkers of our age. Sarah Jeong, Steve Shives, Riley Dennis, Maxine Waters, Donald Trump, Ben Shapiro, Ted Cruz, and Kent Hovind. One-dimensional thinkers typically think in terms of progress for progress's sake, regardless of the consequences. They may also wish to return to a time which they believe was better for everybody. But what they really mean is better for themselves. They typically have very dogmatic ways of thinking, and outsiders are labeled as heretics or Nazis or misogynists. If you deviate even a little from what they consider acceptable, then you are the enemy. They can't accept even the mildest criticism without hurling insults, and they view themselves as moral crusaders. If you criticize their actions, words, or beliefs, you get called a monster. They lack the intellectual capacity to understand any point of view other than their own. Anything they consider morally wrong must be prohibited by law, regardless of what other people think. They're ideologues of the worst kind. Now I bet you're saying, Alistair, but what if I'm one of those one-dimensional thinkers? How do I stop? Well, Sonny Jim, you're in luck. The fact that that thought even crossed your mind is likely proof that you are not a one-dimensional thinker. A one-dimensional thinker, by his or her very nature, wouldn't have such a thought, because to have that thought would be questioning that which, in their opinion, should not be questioned. The only way to free them from their self-imposed delusions is to brutally and thoroughly shatter those delusions irrevocably. You have to rip them out by the roots so they won't grow back. Unfortunately, this is easier said than done. If we knew a way to do that without permanently damaging the poor sap's mind, then we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We'd be fixing it. We'd be out fixing what's broken. My point is, you won't convince these people that they're wrong with words or deeds. You can hurl all the logic and reason you want at them, but it will have zero effect. A reasonable conversation with a one-dimensional thinker is as much of a pipe dream as the idea that a car can run entirely on styrofoam peanuts. Just leave them alone unless they're hurting someone. Trust me, it's much less frustrating. Beating your head against a brick wall does more damage to you than it does the brick wall. So what's the point? Next up are two-dimensional thinkers. Two-dimensional thinkers are generally average, everyday people. They're hardworking, decently well-educated, and usually decently reasonable. But it's extremely unusual for them to be exceptional at anything on a grand historical scale. They're usually good people, but they have a few dicks in their ranks as well. Their belief systems are more well developed than one-dimensional thinkers because they can think in more directions. But their thinking is still limited to 2 dimensions, and they are almost always outshined by people who can think with absolute freedom. Examples of 2-dimensional thinkers are Dean Koontz, John Kasich, Maury Povich, Jay-Z, Kelly Marie Tran, and Kanye West. In all of these cases, they are somewhat reasonable people, but not ones who are particularly genius in what they do, or are at least far outshined by others in their field with greater imagination or talent. Dean Koontz is outshined by Stephen King, Robert Bloch, and Richard Matheson. Kasich was outshined by pretty much everybody in 2016. Theresa May's lack of proactive aggression about Brexit is outshined by many others on the conservative side of UK politics. Jay-Z is outshined by Eminem, Immortal Technique, and LL Cool J. And don't even get me started on Tupac and Biggie. Those guys run lyrical rings around him. It's not even funny. It's not even a contest. Maury Povich is outshined by Oprah on any day of the week. Wait a minute, is he even still on? I don't have cable, so I don't know. It's not a thing in my house. Lastly, despite all the hate people gave her, Kelly Marie Tran's character of Rose is utterly forgettable, and I haven't heard of her being in much else. The only example of her acting that I have to go on is Rose Tico. That's not a good thing. So, to recap, 2-dimensional thinkers are different than their dogmatic counterparts, but simply don't have the innovative abilities required to see the world as it truly is and transcend their own limitations. They are pretty average in just about every way. Their world is more expansive than the one-dimensional thinker, but it's still one that limits their creativity. I think we've covered that enough. Now for 3-dimensional thinker. These are the people who change the world. They are the great inventors, scientists, and mathematicians. They are the great authors, poets, musicians, and directors. They are the civil rights leaders, the revolutionaries, the people who stood up to authority. They typically have 3 things in common, although there are other contributing factors. We won't go into those though, too complicated for a basic video. So, here are the 3 things that separate a 3-dimensional thinker from a 2-dimensional thinker. First, a genuine creative mind. Second, a disregard for authority and an unwillingness to bow to anyone. And third, a 360-degree view of the world we live in. They can typically see all sides and not just the ones they agree with, because just like the 3-dimensional objects, they can see in all directions. They are the mavericks, the people who defied the way the established world ran. They're the music makers and the dreamers of dreams. They see the world for what it really is without the limitations of bias. Every day is a journey for them, and every moment a chance to learn. They seek knowledge above all else, and are the type to sit down and explain to a small child why they can't do something, instead of just ordering the child to do it. They encourage others to think critically and free themselves from their self-imposed shackles. They typically read often, seek out points of view different from their own, are big dreamers with high hopes for the future, and think of others above themselves. Examples of 3-dimensional thinkers include Martin Luther King Jr., Stephen King, Stephen Hawking, Quentin Tarantino, Akira Kurosawa, George Lucas, Robin Williams, J.R.R. Tolkien, Christopher Paolini, and one of my early mentors, T.J. Kirk, otherwise known as the Amazing Atheist. They have all revolutionized the world we live in, or excelled beyond belief at their craft, and they have all left a lasting mark on the world. I like to think that I'll have done something as great as one of them one day. I have the mind, I'm a three-dimensional thinker, but I'm a bit late to the party in that I have only gained access to those intellectual pathways in the last 4.5 years. You see, I was once a one-dimensional thinker too. But I was given a gift, and I was freed from the intellectual shackles that I had been placed in. I've already explained that in a previous video though. Now on to the final part of this topic. Let's explore why people end up in one of these categories, shall we? A small part is genetics. If we are born with certain cognitive limitations, it may be hard for us to truly see the world around us. It may be nearly impossible for some. But most of it is upbringing. For most people, your upbringing decides how you think. Think about it. When you were at home, did your parents ask you to clean a certain way, or to not hang out with certain people, or to wear certain clothes, or to not date certain people? What about school? When the teacher asked you to solve a math problem, write an essay, or make a science project, did you get to choose how you did those things? Were you allowed to solve the problem your own way, or write the essay you wanted to? Or was everything at home and at school strictly regimented with potential consequences for disobeying or deviating from the established method? I'm guessing that most of you just went along with everything without ever questioning why. And that's the problem. The brain of a child is malleable. The child is still growing, and the brain is not fully developed. Strictly regimenting a child's life is harmful. When you don't allow a child to innovate, to explore the why and how of things, to use their imagination, then what you end up with is an adult with a very, very limited intellectual scope. They'll solve their problems the way they were taught, and only the way they were taught. They'll bow to authority figures, regardless of whether those authority figures are actually right. All they'll think is, this person is an authority. There's no way they could be wrong. I must defer to them on this matter. When you train a child's brain to solve a math problem a certain way and only that way, you don't allow them to be creative, and the neural pathways that are required for that don't develop. You get one-dimensional, or at best two-dimensional thinkers. Most modern school systems have no respect for the creative mind. Oh yes, children, worship Robert Frost, Jane Austen, Homer, Lord Byron and Voltaire, but never try to be like them. Never for once think outside the box and try to make the impossible possible. And never ever question the teacher, even though all of the previously mentioned authors and poets would certainly have done so. Do as they say and not as they do. All that matters is making another worker bee for the hive. This way of teaching is cancer, and yet people applaud it, cheer for it, and most never even question it. This way of teaching places permanent intellectual shackles on a child's mind. They persist far into adulthood, perhaps even for life. The bottom line becomes, there is no room for imagination. No space for ability, creativity, or innovation. No, you must solve this problem our way or you'll get bad marks. And that creates one-dimensional thinkers. Take it from someone who's been there. Ignorance is not bliss. One-dimensional thought is a dead end, a condition of hopelessness. It is a barren wasteland populated only by the hateful specters of fear, misery, and despair. It is a hollow void, haunted by the tormented souls of your own insecurities, and beset by the grisly crypt wraiths of the parts of you that yearn for release from your inner chains. To a man desiring knowledge such as myself, It was a prison from which there seemed no escape. But I didn't just give in and hang myself. I kept on going as any true seeker of knowledge would. That's the kind of creatures we are. We take joy in trying to exceed our grasp and to reach for something that in the end may in fact be unreachable. Do you understand? That the truth of the matter is, I despise the ideas of absolutism, dogma, adherence to authority, and strictly regimented order. When a belief is held to be so sacred that merely questioning it is met with scorn, derision, and cruelty, that's it. When your ideology has gotten to the point where skepticism and critical thought are viewed as questioning the Almighty or being a bigot, that's how you know that the one-dimensional people have taken over. And every time you remain silent while members of your group do heinous things, you are letting them get away with it. You don't even have the courtesy to say, "Hey, the person or persons who did this don't represent me. Please don't judge my group by their actions." This is the biggest problem I have with feminists, religious people, Black Lives Matter, politicians, and other such groups. The moderate members of those groups never make their voices heard. They never make any sort of real effort to expose the bad actors of such groups. In fact, the Me Too movement and the Catholic Church go out of their way to protect those bad actors. When Asia Argento was revealed as a sexual predator, Rose McGowan, the champion of sexual assault victims, not only refused to rebuke her for it, she had the audacity, the nerve to defend Asia and treat her differently simply because she's a woman. And yet Rose McGowan is somehow a big hero of the Me Too movement. It's a fucking joke. When Sarah Jean posted those tweets for years, she was still allowed to keep her job, despite the fact that if the genders were swapped, the man would be socially excommunicated. And how many times has the Catholic Church covered up for a case of pedophilia? More than I can count. Black Lives Matter defends racist minorities under the false equation that racism is defined only by privilege plus power. According to them, white people are in charge of everything. They are the Illuminati. It is completely irrelevant to Black Lives Matter whether there is a homeless white veteran stealing food just to survive while Black Lives Matter supporters get to go home and watch a movie. They are devoid of any concern for anyone but themselves. You see, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke, dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. I might appear heartless, cruel, and immoral to these people, but I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve. I've been through hell, and what I've found is that whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you. It's the way we live our lives. It's who we are. And here are the steps you need to advance beyond your limitations. Number 1, seek out those you disagree with. Open a dialogue with them and show them that you are a normal human being who is willing to extend the olive branch. Number 2, read a lot and read often. Reading exposes your brain to new ideas and new ways of thinking. It expands your horizons, which is good for three-dimensional thinking. Number 3, find that one thing you're good at and apply yourself to it in a creative way. If what you're doing is already creative, great. Keep doing it. If not, find a way to introduce some creativity to it. Finally, number 1, submit to no authority but yourself and always question any external authority. Bow before no one. It doesn't matter whether it's your teachers, your parents, your spiritual leaders, your government, your boss, or even your God. Always question authority. Always. And no, that is not a blank check to pillage, murder, rape, and terrorize the townspeople. Questioning authority does not mean go stab a cop in the stomach. It also does not mean embrace every conspiracy theory out there simply because they're unpopular. It means be skeptical of everything. It means when someone says, that's the way things are, you ask why, regardless of whether that person is in charge or not. It is not an excuse to go out there and harm people. I don't want to get a call at the crack of dawn from some US policeman saying that some bloody idiot watched my video and stabbed his dad 37 times, citing my video as a source of inspiration. And now I've started an international incident. So say it with me, Alistair's video is not responsible for any crime I might commit. Now that we've established that, I think we'll end this here. I'm the deputy of common sense. I dispense swift justice to those who aren't so swift. Now, bon nuit to you all.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
Remember, reality is an illusion. The universe is a hologram. Buy gold. Buy!